Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we examine one of the most disturbing cases ever recorded in the history of the Ozarks. Before we proceed, I invite you to leave a comment indicating your current location and the precise moment you're hearing this narration. We're genuinely curious to know from which places and at what hours of the day or night these documented accounts find their audience. Beneath their ancient canopy, the hills of the Ozarks guard countless secrets. Among these, perhaps none has been so deliberately expunged from official records as the story of the Holloway family. What transpired in the remote hills of southwestern Missouri during the winter of 1860 would be systematically removed from county documents, newspaper archives, and collective memory. Yet certain stories simply refuse to remain interred. December of 1860 found the nation hovering on the edge of civil war. It was then that a local hunter named Thomas Blackwell happened upon the abandoned Holloway homestead, situated deep within a secluded valley roughly 20 miles southwest of Springfield. What he encountered there would pursue him for the rest of his life. According to Blackwell's sworn testimony to the Greene County Sheriff, the property appeared as though its occupants had evaporated during their evening meal. Upon the table sat plates bearing half-eaten food, now moldering and decayed. Candles had reduced themselves to nothing. Near the fire, a rocking chair continued its gentle swaying in the draft, yet it was the quiet that unsettled him most profoundly. No birds sang near that location, Blackwell later confided to a journalist from the Missouri Intelligencer. No creatures stirred within the undergrowth. It seemed as though nature herself had averted her gaze from whatever occurred there. The Holloway family, Isaiah, his wife Martha, and Isaiah's elder brother Jeremiah, had established themselves in the Ozarks during 1853, having traveled westward from Virginia, carrying what neighbors described as remarkable wealth for frontier settlers. They acquired 320 acres of heavily forested land and erected a substantial two-story dwelling far removed from any settlement. They remained apart, recalled Abigail Turner, whose husband maintained the farm closest to the Holloway property, still a full hour's ride distant. Mr. Isaiah would visit town monthly for provisions, always courteous yet never welcoming conversation. His wife was never glimpsed. The brother Jeremiah appeared even less frequently. Something within his gaze made people uncomfortable. County documentation reveals that Isaiah Holloway had registered their property deed and satisfied taxes punctually each year. No outstanding obligations existed, no conflicts with neighbors, no apparent cause for alarm. Yet the family dissolved without leaving any trace. What followed proved perhaps even more disturbing than the vanishing itself. Within days of Blackwell's report, County Sheriff Malcolm Harding assembled a search party to examine the premises. Of the 7 men who ventured to the Holloway property that December morning, merely 5 came back. According to surviving narratives, deputies James Collins and Frederick Weber separated from the main group to investigate an old tobacco barn at the property's northern end. When darkness fell and they failed to rejoin the party, the others searched but discovered nothing. A second, larger expedition was organized. This time, 30 armed men combed the property and adjacent woodlands for 3 days. They uncovered no indication of the missing deputies nor of the Holloways. It was as though the earth had consumed them entirely, wrote Sheriff Harding in his official report, now preserved only as a marginal reference within private papers, donated to the Missouri Historical Society in 1928. We examined every portion of that property: the dwelling, the outbuildings, the well, the surrounding forest. We found nothing to clarify what became of the Holloways or my deputies. Yet this statement was not entirely accurate. according to correspondence penned by search party member Wesley Pritchard to his sister in St. Louis. They did discover something deliberately omitted from the official account. Within the cellar beneath the house, Pritchard wrote, "We uncovered a door concealed behind stacked firewood. It opened onto a narrow passage excavated into the earth. The sheriff directed 3 men to investigate. They returned with ashen faces and declined to discuss what they had witnessed. That evening, the sheriff ordered the passage sealed with stones from the property wall and compelled us all to swear an oath never to mention it. What those men encountered within that tunnel remains shrouded in mystery." Pritchard's correspondence offers no additional details, and he himself succumbed to pneumonia mere weeks after composing it. Yet whatever it was, it provoked an extraordinary response from local officials. In January 1861, Greene County Judge Hiram Woodson issued an unprecedented directive. The Holloway property was to be condemned. The dwelling and all outbuildings were to be reduced to their foundations by fire. The land was to be declared unsuitable for occupancy, and all county documents pertaining to the Holloway family were to be sealed or destroyed. Most unusually, Judge Woodson's order, which survives only in fragmented form within a collection of papers discovered during renovations of the old Springfield courthouse in 1954, explicitly forbade any mention of the Holloways in public documents or newspapers. In the interest of public safety and moral welfare, the order reads, "All matters pertaining to the former residents of the property herein specified shall be expunged from public record and public memory. Any violation of this order shall be punishable by fine or imprisonment." Such extreme measures raise troubling questions. What could possibly have occurred that would justify such extraordinary efforts to eliminate all evidence? What dreadful secret did the Holloway property contain? At this point, the documentary trail grows cold. For nearly 4 decades, the Holloway name vanishes from all official records. Their land remained abandoned, a blackened scar in the wilderness that locals circumvented without understanding precisely why. Yet absence of proof does not constitute proof of absence. The story of the Holloways continued circulating in whispers, in fragments of memory transmitted across generations, in the spaces between official histories. In 1898, a folklorist from the newly established Missouri State University, Dr. Eleanor Caldwell, began gathering oral testimonies from elderly Ozarks residents. Among her papers, preserved within the university archives, resides a transcript of an interview with one Martin Howerin, then 82 years old, who had served as a junior deputy with the Greene County Sheriff's Office in 1860. "I was merely a youth," Howerin recounted, "not yet 20 when it occurred. Sheriff Harding kept me behind when they departed for the Holloway place. He said someone needed to tend the office, but I overheard things upon their return, matters not intended for my ears." According to Howerin, during the weeks preceding their disappearance, Isaiah Holloway had visited town with increasing frequency, appearing progressively more agitated with each journey. He had become an altered man, reported Samuel Wilson, the general store proprietor. His garments, once immaculate, had become soiled and wrinkled. His hands trembled so severely he could barely count his coins. On one occasion when I inquired after his family, he fixed his gaze upon me as though he could not grasp the question. During his final visit to Springfield, mere days before the family's vanishing, Isaiah reportedly sought out the local physician, Dr. Thaddeus Montgomery. What passed between them remains largely unknown, as Dr. Montgomery maintained his professional confidentiality even decades later. However, in a private letter to a medical colleague in St. Louis dated 1878, Montgomery made an enigmatic reference to the incident. "Throughout all my years of medical practice," he wrote, I have never encountered a case that disturbed me as profoundly as that of IH. His symptoms defied conventional diagnosis. Yet it was not the physical manifestations that haunted me. Rather, it was the absolute certainty with which he spoke of his brother's metamorphosis. I recommended he seek spiritual counsel, as the affliction appeared beyond medical remedy. This reference to Jeremiah Holloway's transformation finds resonance in the scattered oral accounts collected by Dr. Caldwell nearly 4 decades later. Sarah Jenkins, whose grandmother had been among the few visitors ever welcome to the Holloway home, shared a troubling family narrative. According to Jenkins, her grandmother had been invited to the Holloway residence during autumn 1859 to assist Martha Holloway with preserving the harvest. Grandmother spoke of it only once, late in her life. Jenkins told Dr. Caldwell. She said the house was impressive yet felt somehow wrong. The proportions seemed slightly off, the shadows excessively deep. Martha was kind but moved like a woman under strain. And then there was the brother Jeremiah. Grandmother said he remained upstairs throughout her visit, yet she heard him moving about. Not as a man walks, she said, but more like something heavy being dragged across the floor, back and forth, back and forth. When she inquired about him, both Isaiah and Martha redirected the conversation. Jenkins continued. As she departed, grandmother glimpsed something at an upstairs window. A face, she thought, though somehow distorted. She said it watched her with eyes that seemed to gleam like an animal's in the twilight. That night she dreamed of being pursued through endless chambers of a house that was larger within than without. This account, while subjective and filtered through generations of retelling, finds peculiar corroboration in a document discovered in 1964 during demolition of an old apothecary in Springfield. Concealed within the wall was a small leather-bound volume that appeared to be Jeremiah Holloway's personal journal. The journal, now held in a private collection and rarely accessible to researchers, reportedly contains entries spanning from 1851 to 1860. The earlier entries concern mundane business transactions, weather observations, occasional personal reflections. But commencing in late 1858, the entries become progressively disturbed and incoherent. According to those few scholars who have examined the journal, Jeremiah began recording what he termed the changes. He described waking at night to discover his limbs had elongated. He wrote of a hunger that nothing could appease. He detailed elaborate calculations and diagrams that have resisted interpretation. In his final entry, dated November 12, 1860, mere weeks before the family's disappearance, Jeremiah wrote, "Isaiah knows. I perceive it in his eyes when he brings sustenance. He fears what I am becoming. Martha weeps beyond the door, yet they do not comprehend. This is not affliction but elevation. The hunger is a gift. Through it I can hear the whispers of the ancient ones who inhabited these hills long before us. Soon I shall be prepared to meet them beneath." What are we to make of such ravings? Was Jeremiah Holloway experiencing some form of mental deterioration? A physical disease affecting his neurological function? Or was something more sinister at work? The answer may reside partly in the peculiar history of the land the Holloways selected for their homestead. According to records in the Missouri State Archives, the 320-acre parcel had been surveyed in 1831, yet remained unclaimed for over 20 years, despite available fertile land in the vicinity. Local folklore preserved in the collections of the Ozark Cultural Heritage Center suggests that the indigenous Osage people avoided the valley, considering it a place where the boundary between worlds grew thin. A French trapper named Jean-Baptiste Robidoux, who lived among the Osage during the 1820s, recorded in his journal a conversation with an elder who referred to the valley as Lulu Olve Marsh, the place where dreams walk. The elder warned that those who slept in the valley would find their dreams assuming physical form, and that some dreams, once given flesh, could never be returned to slumber. Whether the Holloways knew of these legends when they purchased the hill land remains unknown. What is documented is that during construction of their home in 1853 to 1854, the workers encountered unusual difficulties. According to an account in the Springfield Gazette, May 12, 1854, the original foundation had to be abandoned after workers discovered what they described as anomalous geological formations that rendered the ground unstable. More telling still is a letter from the construction foreman, Silas Thornton, to his employer in St. Louis explaining his abrupt departure from the project. I regret to inform you that I can no longer continue supervision of the Holloway construction. The site presents challenges beyond my experience, and I find the atmosphere unconducive to sound work. The men complain of disturbed sleep and strange sounds emanating from beneath the earth. Yesterday, 3 workers refused to enter the cellar, claiming they had observed something moving in the darkness. I personally have experienced nothing untoward, yet I cannot discount the effect on morale. I recommend you send a replacement who might approach the task with fresh perspective. Isaiah Holloway ultimately completed the house himself, with assistance only from his brother. This unusual circumstance raised eyebrows within the community, but was attributed to the Holloway's reclusive nature and rumored eccentricity. For the first several years following their arrival, the family maintained a minimal but normal presence in the community. Isaiah made monthly journeys to Springfield for supplies. Jeremiah occasionally accompanied him. Martha Holloway was rarely seen, but was known to correspond with several women's charitable societies in Springfield and St. Louis. A letter from Martha to the Ladies' Aid Society of Springfield dated April 1857 and preserved within the Society's archives provides one of the few direct insights into the family's life during this period. Our home continues taking shape according to our vision, though the isolation sometimes weighs heavily. Isaiah assures me that once the road improvements are complete, we shall entertain more frequently. Jeremiah has grown quite fascinated with the natural features of our property, particularly the unusual rock formations in the western woods. He spends many hours there sketching and taking measurements. He speaks of writing a monograph on the geological peculiarities of the Ozarks, though whether anything will come of it I cannot say. His enthusiasms tend to burn brightly but briefly. This correspondence suggests a relatively normal, if somewhat isolated, existence. Yet, other evidence indicates that beneath this conventional surface, something unusual was developing. In 1912, an archaeological survey conducted by the Smithsonian Institution made a curious discovery in the region where the Holloway property had once stood, beneath a rock overhang approximately 1 mile from the former homestead. Researchers uncovered a network of caves that showed evidence of both Native American occupation centuries earlier and more recent human activity. Among the items recovered from the cave system was a pocket watch bearing the initials JH engraved on its case. Inside was a photograph, badly damaged by moisture yet still recognizable as a family portrait. 3 figures posed stiffly in formal attire: a bearded man, a woman in a high-collared dress, and behind them a taller figure whose face was blurred, whether by damage to the photograph or by movement during exposure. The archaeological report filed by Dr. William Parsons describes additional findings that were not included in the published summary. The cave system extends far deeper than is typical for this region. The primary tunnel branches into numerous smaller passages, many of which show indications of recent enlargement by human hands. Tool marks on the walls indicate systematic excavation rather than exploratory digging. In the largest chamber, approximately 200 feet below the surface, we discovered what appears to be a deliberately constructed space. A roughly circular room with a level floor and walls that have been smoothed. At the center stands a stone table or altar approximately 3 feet in height, bearing markings that correspond to no known Native American or European symbolism. Most disturbing were the artifacts found surrounding the structure, surgical instruments of European manufacture dating to the mid-19th century, glass containers similar to those used by apothecaries of the period, and several journals containing notes and diagrams written in cipher. We have thus far been unable to decode them. The presence of these items so deep within the earth, at a location showing no evidence of habitation, raises profound questions about their purpose. The Smithsonian expedition cataloged these findings, but made no connection to the long-forgotten Holloway family. Indeed, by 1912, the story had been so effectively erased that researchers would have had no reason to make such a connection. The artifacts were cataloged simply as items of unknown provenance, mid-19th century, and placed in storage, where they remained unremarked upon for decades. It was not until 1958 that the threads of the Holloway mystery began to be reconnected, and this through the most unexpected of channels. During construction of a new highway through the Ozarks, workers uncovered human remains while excavating a hillside approximately 15 miles from the former Holloway property. Initial assumptions that they had discovered a Native American burial site were revised when forensic examination revealed the remains to be those of 2 Caucasian males, estimated to have died in the mid-19th century. Most notably, both skeletons showed indications of unusual post-mortem treatment. According to the medical examiner's report, portions of the long bones appeared to have been systematically scored with a sharp implement consistent with the removal of tissue. More disturbing still, both skulls bore evidence of trepanation. Holes carefully drilled through the bone. The identity of these men might have remained mysterious had it not been for a small brass badge found among the remains. Though corroded, careful cleaning revealed it to be a Greene County deputy's badge, number 7, issued to Frederick Weber in 1859. This discovery prompted historian Lawrence Mitchell to begin investigating the long-forgotten case. After years of painstaking research, hampered at every turn by missing records, sealed documents, and the deaths of anyone old enough to possess direct knowledge, Mitchell published his findings in a 1963 monograph titled The Holloway Incident: Institutional Erasure of Historical Trauma in the Ozarks. Mitchell's work, controversial and largely dismissed by academic historians of the time, nonetheless pulled together the disparate threads of the Holloway mystery into a coherent, if incomplete, narrative. He identified the remains as those of the missing deputies, Collins and Weber. He recovered fragments of the court order that had attempted to erase the Holloways from history. Most significantly, he located and interviewed Eliza Montgomery, the 91-year-old daughter of Dr. Thaddeus Montgomery. According to Mitchell's notes, Eliza had found among her father's effects a sealed envelope with instructions that it not be opened until 50 years after his death. Inside was a detailed account of Isaiah Holloway's final visit to her father's practice. Isaiah Holloway came to me in a state of extreme agitation, Dr. Montgomery wrote. His physical condition was poor, significant weight loss, pallor, tremors, but his mental state was of greater concern. He claimed his brother Jeremiah had undergone a transformation defying natural law. According to Montgomery's account, Isaiah described how Jeremiah had become increasingly reclusive over the preceding months, refusing to leave his room on the upper floor of their home. He consumed enormous quantities of food, yet continued wasting away physically. He spoke of voices calling to him from beneath the earth. Isaiah confided that he had begun to fear for his wife's safety. Montgomery continued. He reported discovering her one night sleepwalking toward Jeremiah's room. When he awakened her, she had no recollection of leaving her bed. On another occasion, he discovered her in the cellar, digging at the earthen floor with her bare hands. Again, with no memory of her actions. Most disturbing of all, Isaiah claimed to have observed his brother on the property at night, moving in a manner he described as neither human nor animal, and appearing to commune with something unseen in the darkness. Dr. Montgomery's assessment was that Isaiah Holloway was suffering from a shared psychosis, possibly influenced by the isolated conditions of their homestead. He prescribed rest and suggested the family consider returning east to more civilized surroundings. I did not see Mr. Holloway again, Montgomery concluded. When news of the family's disappearance reached me, I provided what information I could to Sheriff Harding. I was not invited to join the search party, nor was I informed of their findings. Later, when Judge Woodson issued his extraordinary order to expunge all record of the Holloway family, I understood that something had been discovered that was deemed too disturbing for public knowledge. I have honored that decision until now, but as I approach the end of my life, I feel compelled to leave this account for future generations. What Montgomery's account does not explain is why Isaiah Holloway, clearly disturbed by his brother's condition, did not simply abandon the homestead with his wife. What kept them there despite growing fear and concern? The answer may lie in another document that Mitchell uncovered during his research. A letter from Martha Holloway to her sister in Richmond, Virginia, dated October 1860, mere weeks before the family's disappearance. Dearest Carolyn, I write in haste and with trembling hand. I dare not commit to paper the full extent of our situation for fear this letter might fall into wrong hands, or worse, be intercepted by J before it leaves our property. Suffice to say we find ourselves in circumstances of the utmost gravity. Isaiah speaks of returning east, but I fear it is too late for such a simple solution. J would not permit it, and his influence over Isaiah grows stronger daily. They share a bond of blood I cannot break, and there is the matter of what lies beneath. What Isaiah and J discovered last spring during their excavations. I have not seen it myself, but its effect on them both was profound. Isaiah speaks of it only in whispers, and always with a strange reverence that chills my blood. I have made preparations of my own, though I do not know if I shall have opportunity to implement them. In the drawer of my writing desk, I have left a full account of all that has transpired here, since we first arrived. If you do not hear from me by Christmas, I implore you to contact the authorities in Springfield and direct them to that document. But caution them most severely about what they might find. Your devoted sister Martha. This letter, which Mitchell claimed to have found among the personal effects of Carolyn Whitfield, nonde Bradford after her death in 1910, suggests a situation far more complex than simple mental deterioration. It implies that both Holloway brothers had discovered something beneath their property, something that exerted powerful influence over them. Martha's reference to a full account hidden in her writing desk adds another layer to the mystery. No such document was ever found, or if it was suppressed along with all other records of the Holloway family. The writing desk itself may have been destroyed when the property was burned on Judge Woodson's orders. Mitchell's monograph drew little attention when published. Academic reviewers criticized his methodology and dismissed his conclusions as sensationalistic. The local historical society in Springfield refused to stock the book. Within a year, the publisher had remaindered the unsold copies, and Mitchell himself, disillusioned, abandoned academia for a career in journalism. But obscurity is not oblivion. Copies of Mitchell's work survived in university libraries and private collections. And in 1967, the discovery of a mass grave in a remote area of the Ozarks brought renewed attention to his research. The grave, uncovered accidentally by a forestry survey team, contained the remains of at least 7 individuals. Forensic analysis indicated they had died in the mid-19th century. Like the deputy's remains discovered earlier, these skeletons showed signs of unusual post-mortem treatment, scored bones, trepaned skulls. But there was more. The positioning of the remains suggested they had been arranged in a deliberate pattern. Dr. Victor Carrington, the anthropologist who examined the site, noted in his report the remains were arranged in a roughly circular pattern with all skulls oriented toward the center. At the center point was placed a stone object, roughly cylindrical, approximately 8 inches in height and 4 inches in diameter. The object bears markings corresponding to no known Native American or European symbolism. The stone cylinder was photographed and measured before being transferred to the Smithsonian for further analysis. Before it could be properly examined, however, the object disappeared from the secure storage facility where it had been placed. An internal investigation concluded it had been misplaced during cataloging, but no record of its current location has ever been found. The identity of the individuals in the mass grave has never been conclusively established. Dental records were non-existent for that period, and DNA analysis was decades away from development. But circumstantial evidence, the location, the time period, the unusual treatment of the remains, has led some researchers to connect this discovery to the Holloway mystery. Could these be the remains of the Holloway family and others who encountered whatever horror befell them? The positioning of the bodies suggests ritual purpose rather than hasty disposal of murder victims. But what ritual, and to what end? Mitchell, contacted by journalists following the discovery, offered a theory widely dismissed as fantastical. He suggested that Jeremiah Holloway had discovered something in the caves beneath their property, something ancient and malevolent that had gradually taken possession of him. In his deteriorating mental state, Jeremiah had begun influencing his family and eventually others who came into contact with them, drawing them into a ritual designed to. Here Mitchell's theory becomes vague. Referring to doorways and entities from elsewhere, academic researchers rejected Mitchell's supernatural explanations, instead proposing more conventional alternatives. A family driven to murderous insanity by isolation, a religious cult practicing extreme rituals, even a localized outbreak of ergot poisoning from contaminated grain, known to cause hallucinations and psychosis. What cannot be explained by conventional means, however, is the systematic effort to erase all evidence of the Holloway family from public record. Judge Woodson's extraordinary order speaks to a level of institutional response far exceeding typical reaction to even the most heinous crimes of the period. A more mundane but equally disturbing theory emerged from the work of medical historian Dr. Elizabeth Foster, who in 1965 published a study of 19th-century medical practices in rural America. In a chapter devoted to experimental treatments, she discussed cases of physicians who, isolated from oversight and driven by misguided scientific zeal, conducted unethical experiments on patients. The frontier provided an ideal environment for those whose medical interests exceeded the bounds of conventional ethics. Foster wrote, "Distance from medical authorities, coupled with the desperate need for any medical care among isolated communities, created conditions where experimental practices could flourish unchecked." Foster cited several documented cases of physicians who performed unauthorized surgeries, tested unproven medications, or engaged in dubious anatomical research, while she made no direct reference to the Holloway case. Indeed, she may have been entirely unaware of it. Her work suggests a possible framework for understanding Jeremiah Holloway's activities. Could Jeremiah, perhaps trained in medicine or science, have been conducting some form of illicit research in the isolated environment of the Ozarks? The surgical instruments found in the cave system, the references to transformations and changes in his journal, the evidence of systematic post-mortem treatment of human remains, all point to a pattern of methodical experimentation rather than random violence or supernatural influence. This theory gained unexpected support in 1968 when an archivist at the University of Pennsylvania Medical School discovered a student record from 1841 to 1845 for one Jeremiah Holloway of Richmond, Virginia. According to this record, Holloway was an exemplary student who showed particular interest in comparative anatomy and the emerging field of evolutionary biology. His doctoral dissertation, titled On Physiological Adaptation and the Malleability of Human Form, argued for the possibility of inducing controlled anatomical changes through environmental and chemical interventions. The dissertation itself has been lost, but a faculty evaluation survives in which Holloway's advisor, Dr. William Patterson, expressed concern about the extreme nature of his students' theoretical propositions and troubling indications that Mr. Holloway may have engaged in unsanctioned experimental work. Despite these concerns, Holloway was awarded his medical degree and appears to have established a practice in Richmond before relocating to Missouri with his brother's family. If Jeremiah Holloway was indeed conducting some form of radical medical experimentation in the isolated environment of the Ozarks, it might explain many aspects of the mystery: the family's choice of such a remote location, the excavations beneath the property, Isaiah's growing distress as he witnessed his brother's activities, and the extreme measures taken by authorities to erase all evidence after discovering the true nature of what had occurred. Yet even this theory fails to account for certain elements of the story, particularly the references to ancient ones who dwelt in these hills in Jeremiah's journal and the stone cylinder with its unidentified markings found at the center of the mass grave. In 1969, the final piece of the Holloway puzzle emerged. During renovation of an old boarding house in Springfield that was being converted into a hotel, workers discovered a cache of personal effects hidden in a sealed compartment beneath the floorboards of room 17. Among these items was a leather portfolio containing what appeared to be official documents bearing the seal of Greene County. The documents included a complete copy of Judge Woodson's order regarding the Holloway property, Sheriff Harding's full report of the search party's findings, and most significantly, a personal account written by Judge Woodson himself, apparently intended as an explanation for his actions. What was found beneath the Holloway house defies rational explanation, Woodson wrote. The tunnel discovered in the cellar extended far deeper than any natural formation should allow. The search party reported descending for what seemed like hours, though in measured time, it was perhaps 30 minutes. They discovered chambers that Sheriff Harding described as architecturally impossible, rooms that appeared to shift and change as they were observed, passages that led in circles despite maintaining constant direction. Woodson continued, in the deepest chamber, they discovered what appeared to be an altar of some kind. Upon it lay a book bound in material no man present could identify. Harding reported that when Deputy Collins attempted to open the book, the chamber filled with a sound like thousands of voices whispering simultaneously. Collins began convulsing. Weber, attempting to assist him, was likewise affected. The remaining men fled, half carrying Sheriff Harding, who had fallen into a state of catatonia from which he did not emerge for 3 days. When Harding regained his faculties, he ordered the tunnel sealed immediately. He then consulted with Judge Woodson, who issued his unprecedented order to expunge all records of the incident. "I do not know what ancient evil the Holloways unearthed beneath their home," Woodson concluded. "I know only that it is beyond human comprehension, and that knowledge of its existence can only bring harm. I have ordered all records destroyed, not to hide the truth, but to protect humanity from it. May God forgive me if I am wrong." These documents, like so many others connected to the Holloway case, disappeared shortly after their discovery. The renovation contractor who found them reported that men identifying themselves as government historians took possession of the papers, providing a receipt that later proved fraudulent. No trace of these documents has ever been found in any government archive. What are we to make of Judge Woodson's account? The reference to architecturally impossible chambers and a book bound in unidentifiable material strains credulity. Perhaps Woodson, like the Holloways themselves, had fallen victim to some form of mass hallucination or shared psychosis. Or perhaps he deliberately embellished his account to justify the extreme measures he had taken. Yet one detail from Woodson's narrative finds unexpected echo in a seemingly unrelated source. In 1932, folklorist Vance Randolph published Ozark Magic and Folklore, a collection of superstitions and folk beliefs from the region. Among the tales he recorded was one told by an elderly woman from Taney County who claimed her grandfather had been part of a hunting party in the 1860s that discovered a door to the underworld in a remote valley. According to the woman, whose name Randolph recorded only as Mrs. M., her grandfather described entering a cave that went down and down, far deeper than any cave should go. Inside they found rooms that changed their shape when you weren't looking directly at them, and heard thousands of voices, whispering all at once. Randolph dismissed this account as a colorful example of rural fantasy, perhaps influenced by popular adventure literature of the 19th century. He could not have known of its striking similarity to Judge Woodson's suppressed description of what was found beneath the Holloway property. Could both accounts be describing the same phenomenon? And if so, what was the nature of that phenomenon? A natural geological formation misinterpreted by superstitious minds? An elaborate hoax perpetrated by the Holloways for reasons unknown, or something genuinely anomalous that defied conventional understanding? The answer may lie in the geological history of the Ozarks themselves. The region is known for its extensive cave systems, formed over millions of years by the action of water on soluble limestone. Some of these caves extend hundreds of feet below the surface and contain chambers of breathtaking size. The acoustics in such spaces can produce strange effects, with sounds reflected and distorted in ways that might seem supernatural to those unfamiliar with the phenomenon. Moreover, certain limestone formations contain high levels of naturally occurring gases, including carbon dioxide and in some cases hydrogen sulfide. In confined spaces, these gases can accumulate to levels causing confusion, hallucinations, and even unconsciousness or death. Is it possible that the Holloway property sat atop such a formation and that Jeremiah, perhaps driven by scientific curiosity, had deliberately channeled these gases into their home as part of his experiments? This theory would explain many elements of the mystery: the behavioral changes in the family members, the references to voices and transformations, even the extreme reaction of authorities who might have recognized the public health danger posed by the release of toxic gases. Yet it fails to account for other aspects of the case the arranged bodies in the mass grave, the stone cylinder with its unknown markings, the systematic post-mortem treatment of human remains. These point to deliberate human activity rather than natural phenomena or accidental poisoning. Perhaps the truth lies in some combination of these theories. Jeremiah Holloway, a trained physician with unorthodox ideas, discovers an unusual geological formation beneath the property, perhaps a natural source of mind-altering gases. He begins experimenting with these gases, possibly on himself and later on his family members. Under their influence, he develops a delusional belief system involving ancient ones and transformations. This delusion manifests in ritualistic behavior, including the surgical modification of human remains. When authorities discover the full extent of his activities, they recognize both the public health danger and the potential for mass panic, leading to the extraordinary measures to erase all evidence. This explanation, while plausible, remains speculative. The systematic erasure of records has been too effective, the passage of time too great, for any definitive conclusion. And perhaps this is the most disturbing aspect of the Holloway mystery. Not what we know, but what remains deliberately hidden. The extraordinary lengths to which officials went to erase all evidence suggests a terror beyond mere human violence. It speaks to a fear so profound that those who encountered it believed the only safe response was to bury not just the physical evidence, but the very memory of its existence. In the decades since these events, the land where the Holloway property once stood has remained undeveloped. Local residents avoid the area without knowing precisely why. Hikers occasionally report unusual experiences: disorientation, lost time, the sensation of being watched. Forest rangers discourage exploration of the more remote valleys, citing unstable ground and dangerous sinkholes. In 1968, a graduate student in geology from the University of Missouri attempted to conduct a survey of cave systems in the area. After 2 days in the field, he returned to his base camp in a state of extreme agitation, packed his equipment, and left without explanation. He withdrew from the university the following week. Attempts to contact him for this research were unsuccessful. What the student encountered remains unknown, but his field notes, recovered from the abandoned camp, contain a curious entry dated June 17, 1968. Found unusual formation approximately 3 miles southwest of base camp. Narrow vertical shaft appears man-made or at least modified. Descended approximately 30 feet with ropes. Temperature dropped significant, at least 15 degrees below surface. Acoustic properties extraordinary. Voice echoes returned distorted, almost like whispers. Air quality concerns, feeling lightheaded. Will return tomorrow with gas detector and better equipment. There is no record of the student ever returning to the site. University officials, concerned by his abrupt departure, sent a search team to the coordinates noted in his field book. They reported finding no evidence of the shaft he described, though they noted that the area showed signs of recent ground movement, possibly a small landslide that might have concealed the entrance. The Holloway story intersects with another curious episode in the history of the Ozarks. The so-called Mad Trapper of Taney County in the winter of 1891-1892. A series of disturbing incidents occurred in a remote area approximately 40 miles south of the former Holloway property. Hunters and trappers reported finding their game strangely mutilated. Several men went missing, only to be found weeks later wandering in a state of confusion, unable to account for their whereabouts or experiences. Local authorities attributed these events to a hermit known only as Old Webster, who had lived in isolation in the hills for decades. According to contemporary accounts, Webster was eventually cornered in a cave by a sheriff's posse. Rather than surrender, he retreated deeper into the cave system. The boss, unwilling to follow him into the darkness, sealed the entrance with dynamite. What connection, if any, this incident has to the Holloway case remains speculative. But a tantalizing hint appears in the personal papers of Sheriff Elias Barton, who led the posse. In a letter to his brother dated February 1892, Barton wrote, "The business with Webster is concluded, though in a manner that leaves me deeply troubled. Before we sealed the cave, I observed markings on the walls near the entrance that I have seen only once before, on certain papers related to the Holloway incident of '60. I would have investigated further had circumstances permitted. But the men were eager to be done with the business and away from that accursed place. I cannot help wondering if there is some connection between these separate events, separated by 30 years, yet bearing the same strange hallmark. This reference suggests that the symbol found on the stone cylinder in the mass grave, and presumably in the chambers beneath the Holloway property, had appeared again in connection with another disturbing incident. If we accept Sheriff Barton's observation at face value, it implies a continuity, a tradition or influence that persisted across decades. The most recent chapter in the Holloway mystery unfolded in 1965, when a researcher named Daniel Crawford began investigating historical land records in Greene County. Crawford, a doctoral student in American history at Columbia University, was initially interested in patterns of property ownership and land use in the post-Civil War period. His attention was drawn to the unusual legal status of a particular parcel of land, the former Holloway property, which had remained under county ownership since 1861 with strict prohibitions against development or habitation. Intrigued by this anomaly, Crawford began searching for information about the property's former owners. He quickly encountered the systematic erasure of records that had so effectively obscured the Holloway story. Undeterred, he expanded his research to include personal papers, oral histories, and non-official sources. Over the course of 2 years, Crawford pieced together much of the narrative recounted here. His research notes, housed in the special collections of Columbia University Library, reveal a methodical mind grappling with fragmentary evidence and contradictory accounts. But they also show something else, a growing obsession with the case, and in the later entries, signs of increasing paranoia. In his final entry, dated November 3, 1967, Crawford wrote, "I am being followed. I have felt their presence for weeks now. But today I saw one of them clearly. A man in a dark suit standing outside my apartment building. When our eyes met, he smiled in a way that chilled my blood. They know what I've discovered. They know I've seen the connections." The Holloways were only the beginning. The same pattern has repeated across decades. In 1892,